Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Zerene Team Talks. I'm joined by Zerene founder, president, inventor, and doer extraordinaire, Arash Sabet, and the amazing head of software, Steve Sulak. Today, we're going to be talking about an extended use case study featuring one of our beta users. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Arash, could you tell us a little bit about our beta user, the starting point, and how we got into using Zerene with them?
Totally. Yeah. So this is a bit of a unique case because for most beta tests, we're having users use it, for a 2-week period, and then having a few follow-ups weeks thereafter. But this particular user was she was one of the earliest beta testers, and so she was really a pathfinder for us along the way. And so she ended up using her Zerene, and she continues to actually use her Zerene for, I think it was over 40 nights, with some gaps in between those. So she's really been, one of our life leaders, I guess, with regards to using Zerene. Being an early beta tester, she came across some of the earlier issues that she identified for us and we resolved. So one of the things that what was interesting with this particular beta tester was that we were still trying to figure out how do we dial in the parameters to get the reduction in clenching and grinding behavior that we're really after. And so she was really kind of ahead of the game as we were trying to still figure out like where do we set the vibration thresholds, how do we set the motor power. We were kind of trying to figure things out, and that's part of the reason why her study has been going what was so long. But what's exciting is that we did ultimately see we were able to dial in those parameters for her, and Steve will talk about the details of that in a bit. And it's exciting to see that with the Zerene, you can really make these like tuning adjustments to how it's delivering the feedback, and then how the user behavior really adjusts. And you can see it in this particular participant.
Love it. Okay, so Steve, shall we jump into the data?
Yeah, let's do it. Z-score is a composite quantitative number that we create for a night of sleep. And it's based on how many times you bite and how hard you bite. So that it kind of, it takes into account all of the things that are sort of important for users in terms of their jaw feelings of discomfort and whatnot. So we see here like a bar graph. We've got two colors on this bar graph is kind of the first thing I noticed prominently. And the legend is in the upper right corner of the picture. And so it's either indicating study or training. So we refer to a study night as a night where the device is monitoring the biting behavior of the user, but it's not trying to take any action to help the user stop that behavior. And the reason we do that is because at the very beginning, that big block of blue over to the left, we want to know what someone's natural sort of regular daily pattern is. That's because we have a very quantitative approach to treating bruxism. We want to know the starting point so that we can continue to monitor and reference to it to make sure that we're making progress on helping people resolve their teeth grinding issues and concerns. So I'm going to move left to right through the graph. And so after that big initial block of blue, which, sort of with the help of this user, we've been able to shrink that a little bit. We typically baseline people for somewhere between 3 and 5 nights. It just sort of depends on how consistent it is. I'll also mention, like, you'll notice some nights are big and some nights are kind of smaller. Those aren't necessarily the user. In the early day of the device, we had a different set of like physical characteristics of the device and also software behavior, which meant that the data sort of showed up differently. This is kind of becoming more consistent over time as we work with the product and learn more about it and sort of mature it. But anyways, you can see a a big green block next to it. That was sort of the initial, first 10-ish days of use. And then you can see that there's kind of a big shift down to a smaller little population of, to me, they're starting to look like trees. So little friendly green trees. And then to the far right, you see some blue come back again because that's measuring another thing that is important for Zerene. So how long the training lasts. So after you go through a period of training where you're getting feedback from the device to help you become aware of your biting behavior, we have the ability to learn it. Even though we're asleep, still unconsciously, your body's able to train itself to kind of like notice these moments with the help of the additional feedback from the device. And you don't forget that. It's kind of like riding a bike, unconscious. But we want to know, how long can users go before they need to come, take another ride around the block to make sure their skills stay strong. Everybody needs a refresher from time to time. I think this is kind of natural. So in this particular user, they started in May. We were talking about that early 14-day period. And then they did 30 sessions of training spanning basically from the start of June out through the end of July. So that's a 2-month period. Just wanted to call out that at the sort of end of a long block of usage, they took a really big break, a 1-month break. And we were excited to see that coming back after that 1-month break, they still were having a lot less grinding than they had at the beginning. All right, so as Arash mentioned earlier, we were in the process of developing the sort of mechanical structure of the product at the time. And so the red annotation here, straw fixed, is when Arash discovered a manufacturing process improvement that could be done to make sure the seals were better, basically, like for the user in their end use system, which for us, what it means is that it was under measuring before, and sort of after this line, it's measuring more accurately what the actual behavior is. So future users just get to benefit from this. But in the case of this user, we were probably getting an underreporting of what was going on before that change was made. And then the other thing that happened was there's a firmware update called out in gray. And that was when we changed the logic of the software that was inside the module to provide more timely responses to the biting to try to help improve like the training effect. At this point, we can now see some of the settings that we were using to try to improve the treatment effect for the user that we're discussing today. So the numbers that appeared on the graph are referring to the 2 points in time when we made sort of the first major corrections or adjustments to those settings. And so really quickly to re-explain what those settings are, one is when the device will start to provide feedback that you're biting. We call that the threshold. And so basically, you can set it to different levels, whether you have to bite really, really hard and really clench your jaw, or whether you can bite sort of medium or lightly. That's one of the settings we have to adjust. And the other is how much vibration the device provides to give you an external feedback that you're biting to help key you in on the behavior. So on the graph where we see the number 1, we made the first adjustment to this user's settings, and that was by boosting the motor vibration power. So we set it up to more sort of towards the upper end, and we watched the effect for a few days, and we noticed that it didn't have a strong response. So then we came in, made our second setting adjustment at point 2, where we decreased the threshold, meaning that it would trigger earlier. And because as we were talking earlier with Z-score, it's time and strength. So in this user's case, we needed to kind of hit that lower level to address the kind of biting that they were doing. And after that, you can sort of see that the green lines kind of shrink down to the axis or flatten out, which basically means that the bite effort is getting smaller and smaller over time. I guess maybe to summarize, obviously there was a learning journey we were going through with the product, like as this user was using it. With some product improvements, we were able to sort of at least quantitatively demonstrate a big shift in behavior from before they were getting, training feedback from the device to after. We also saw some durability to that training. And it's not in the data, but when we went through it with the user, they pointed out that they felt the training shift as well, and that when they did start to resume using it, they did so because they'd noticed, in the mornings, whereas they had been feeling a very very comfortable, very, very healthy jaw, they felt that it was starting to become a little bit more uncomfortable. But they knew that they could get back to that point by picking up Zerene again, which was really exciting for us to hear that like they were able to make the connection with the, just the assistance, the help the device was able to provide.
It is really exciting to hear the user in this case like commenting on how she really felt a qualitative improvement in her life and that it generally matched up with the data. Ultimately the data is irrelevant if it doesn't really manifest as like a benefit to the user that's somehow apparent to them. And so it's really exciting to see this. And it's also something that we're trying to learn from because we want to try to understand how we can like quantitatively or how with the flow of the app and the use of the device, like catch when the person is maybe starting to kind of revert back to like the previous behavior if that happens and try to head them off. So one thing that we're working on as a team is how do we occasionally interrogate after a training period, like how are people kind of slipping back into their previous behaviors, or is it really still sticky and their benefits are staying with them? And so it's exciting to see this, and just want to note that hopefully we're able to kind of continue to give people a kind of a lasting effect from their initial training.
And one thought that sort of brought up for me is that like this was a really great sort of like Z-score validation kind of exercise for us as a company. And so as Arash was saying, it's the user health and feelings of wellness that are what we're driving for. And so being able to relate quantitatively with the data we're able to generate from the device to the way the user is actually feeling built up a lot of confidence for us that it was a valid approach and one that was transferable to other people. And that's why we've been running the beta, just to make sure we get this system dialed in so that it will work well for even more folks. The Z-score, maybe just like ignore the numbers for now and just look at the relative heights of things. But there are 4 rows here. The top one is actually the same as what we saw on the prior graph. And then the 3 below it are the 3 components that we sort of sum together to create a Z-score for a night. And the way that we've done that is by basically grouping them on how strong the bite is. So the bottom 3 rows, the bottommost one is very, very strong bites. Like you're biting as hard as you can with your teeth kind of bites. The one in the middle is obviously middle. And then the one in the top of that group of 3, or the second row, is sort of like lighter clenching, like bringing your teeth together, but maybe not in a very intense way. And so what we like to see in this graph is that as time goes to the right, each one of these is a night of use of the device. We see that the more intense rows are sort of decreasing. So if we compare where the user was at on the left side to where they were at on the right side, we can see that there's negligible, very strong biting, whereas there was a lot of really hard teeth grind holding on the left. And then even medium has reduced a lot too. So there's less biting, and there's also less intensity of the biting. And from a numbers sense, like that makes sense to us, and it also relates to their feelings of, you know, improvement and comfort in their jaws. And so that was also part of like just connecting the numbers back to the user experience. This shows, rather than z-score just bites, so you know, we count the number of times we see the signature of a bite in the data, and then we divide it by the number of hours that a user sleeps, so that we kind of get an average performance. And that allows us to compare between short nights and long nights, because, you know, we don't necessarily sleep with great consistency in length. But it's just, it sort of gets folded into the z-score, but it also tracks it like fairly closely. It just tends to, it understates how long people are biting for. And so that's one of the reasons why we like the z-score in comparison to this metric. We spoke to this when we were looking at the full user history. But one of the things we do is we take little sections of the data and we compare them, just so that we could quantify for the user what the improvement is. So you have to recall from your memory maybe where some of this data is coming from. But we took the last 3 nights of study in blue. So I'm talking to the top left bar graph. And we took the last 3 nights of training that the user did, and we averaged them and looked at what the decrease was. So in the case of this user, based on the z-score, they had improved 94%, which sort of related to the feeling they expressed, just related to really improved jaw comfort. And then in the bottom row, we looked at, well, the initial place of study where we were doing the baseline compared to when we had them do study, no device feedback, again, more than a month after they'd stopped using it. They were still doing 80% better, roughly, than when they started. So that just showed that there had been some amount of persistent learned behavior change from using it. And so another thing that we have available to offer to our users is statistics on what other people that have that are going through teeth grinding and bruxism discomfort look like. So one of the things we do for our users is we just provide them some comparison points to what else we've seen. So in this particular one, we took the, we're reusing the user's behavior from the last graph, and we're comparing it to what the average for the pool was. So in the case of this user, they were a little above sort of middle of the pack in terms of like where they started before. And then their improvement was a little larger than what other folks were seeing. So we usually like to tell the users, you definitely bite, you definitely grind your teeth. Like, you haven't been using a mouth guard in vain for all these years. But also now, you've improved quite a bit, which most users have been appreciating so far. Oh, we made it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Steve, so much. That was such a great way to see the data and understand more about what it really means. So I thought now we could have a quick discussion about any points of excitement, any takeaways, things that we learned from that, or things that we remember the user learning from that we would like to share with others to give them hope.
Yeah, I can provide some thoughts first, maybe. Yeah, well, we here at Zerene, we're really committed to giving people a great option for managing their ruxing, and ultimately to having like a more restful night of sleep, less discomfort that they may be experiencing. That's what we're trying to do. And what's exciting is that given that we're really a data-driven approach, and we're really our processes are getting better as we get more data and we have more participants. So even though this particular user is not associated with anybody else out there that may be watching this, the data that we garner and that we simulate into the Zerene product is going to help you. And so that's really exciting, is that we're kind of starting at a place and we're getting better, and we're trying our best to get better as fast as we can, so that users who come after the first users really have a more refined experience. So that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. There isn't a data set sort of like this available yet. Typically, when a dentist identifies for a patient that they're having some issue grinding their teeth, it can be a little bit unsatisfying. You don't have sources you can turn to on the internet, really, and you kind of just keep using it, endlessly, and it's a little bit difficult. So having like a community sort of rallying around it, like pooling their data together, helping to improve the overall system, I think that's pretty exciting. And we've introduced a lot of changes through the course of the beta so far, and it seems to be tracking very well. So I think that is very exciting for sure. Is just to continue to scale and help more folks.
Okay, I love it. And I would just add, I really love that this user used and hung out with Zerene for such a long time, because it's really something that we hope will be a part of people's lives, helping to improve their lives over the long term. And to see and hear that it became a friendly part of their life that they understood was going to be helping them to continue to have better sleep and to have healthier teeth and jaws was really encouraging. So thank you so much, Arash and Steve, as always, for your expertise and the excellent discussion. Who knows what the Zerene team will talk about next? So you just be sure to tune in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.